What is the right intention with wanting to do this sadhana?
You should be ready to die to be there. No God realization can happen without you dying as an ego.
Explain what chakras are.
Chakra means wheel, something that is moving constantly and propelling. So these 7 chakras in our body are 7 energy points that are actually distributing the cosmic energy that we are receiving. It's God created.
The Pishach realm is as powerful as the Dev realm.
Yes. The universe is equally divided between white and black. It has to be. So the Pishak Shakti, it's kind of almost like parasitic on someone. It makes a person victim and to death it will not leave. What the Western world calls vampires. They thrive and survive on the prana of living beings.
Where would you place Satan in this?
Kahin bhi dalo. The moment you catch yourself going in any variation of moods, immediately start doing japa. Even if you, for the heck of it, you say Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, even if you don't mean it, it will still connect you to the realm above and not allow you to fall down.
So there are siddhis packed into each one of our bodies, minds and souls.
Yes.
What is an understandable siddhi that you can talk about?
Vak Siddhi is the power of speech, manifestation. Some people have more manifesting power than others. The cells here get activated, they get divinized. Whatever you say becomes the power, the command that the universe has to accept.
I've understood that, hey, this human life that we know is fully conditioned.
Is redundant, it's futile, it's all drama, and it's all a waste of time.
In the last 1 year, this guest has been one of our most loved spiritual guests. It's all about the aura she brings, it's all about the practical experience she brings, and it's all about the tantric vidya, the knowledge that she brings to these conversations. Today, we deep dive into the Dash Mahavidya concept, which we have covered on the channel, but Ma Gyan Suvira brings her own spin to it. It's always almost therapeutic talking to Ma, and I hope you feel the same way by the end of the episode. It's Ma Gyan Suvira on TRS. Welcome back, Ma.
Thank you, Ranveer.
We have taken an hour-long break since the last recording, and people have gotten to know what you're about. So thank you for being in our studio again.
Thank you.
We've created 2 incredibly deep episodes about the Dash Mahavidyas with Dr. Vineet Agarwal and Rajarshi Nandi sir, and both approach this subject from 2 different angles.
Yeah.
For the sake of research for our podcast, I went through a speech that you had given about the Dash Mahavidyas. And you spoke about how it's linked to the chakras within the human body as well. You also began by speaking about Kalima and Tarama and one more,
Shodashi.
Shorashi. That's a goddess that I've not heard about.
Tripur Sundari.
Okay, gotcha. Understood. It's the same thing?
Yeah.
All right. I'll actually hand it over to you because there was a lot of parts of that speech which I found extremely fascinating, but a lot of places where I wanted to ask you more questions. So I'm getting to do that today. I'll let you begin today's episode by either beginning wherever you want or a mantra jap. Completely up to you.
So, since it is dedicated to the Mahavidyas, we'll do a small mantra of the Mahavidyas. Om Shri Mahaganpate Namaha. काली तारा महाविद्या षोडशी भुवनेश्वरी भैरवी छिन्नमस्ता च विद्या धूमवती तथा बगला सिद्धविद्या च मातंगी कमलात्मिका एतादश महाविद्या सिद्धविद्या प्रकीर्तिता एतादश महाविद्या गुप्तविद्या प्रकीर्तिता ओम.
Why Gupta Vidya?
The Mahavidyas are hidden. They are fierce forces, purest form of energy. When the creation happened and when consciousness, the immovable consciousness, began the churning, the spandan of energy, and Shiva and Shakti spandan started. the force that came out, Mahashakti. We call it Adi Shakti. In the Mahavidya tradition, we call it Adi Shakti. So this Adi Shakti is standalone energy, backed by consciousness, of course, backed by the power of Shiva, of course, but it is standalone energy. It has a masculine and feminine polarity in one. Mahavidyas don't have consorts. In the present day time, in the present study of Mahavidyas, in the present era, we do have a form of Shiva with every Mahavidya. We do have a form of even Vishnu in corresponding to every Mahavidya. However, in the history of Mahavidyas, they were standalone powers without the need of a consort, without the need of another. So that means that it was a complete amalgamation and culmination of perfect unison of the masculine and feminine polarity. That is why they are so fiery looking. They are so natural and raw to look at. You don't see Mahavidyas decked up and dressed up. We do them for our worship. We deck them up like Devis, but they are huge portals of energy, starting from Mahakali. So, in our tradition, and if I can speak a little about the Mahaganpati Sampradaya that I belong to, we have a Dashabhuja Ganesha in our hermitage in Rishikesh. Dasabhuja, that means 10 arms.
Okay.
A Ganesha with 10 arms and a Devi sitting in his lap. So the Sampradaya, the gurus and the teachers who were there in many lifetimes, they have been dedicated to both the study and worship of Ganesha and Devi, which is why I happen to be the blessed one to receive both these sadhanas parallelly, And the Dasha Mahavidya comes in the oral tradition. We don't have much of information. There is Puranic information which talks about the Shakti manifesting, Durga manifesting as this, and that is a part, that's a much later information. In its origin, the Dash Mahavidyas are absolute crude raw energy. Starts with Mahakali, and she manifests as the three gunas. The universe starts, the creation of the universe starts with the creation of the gunas. The three gunas are created first, then the Pancha Mahabhutas, and then the Panchikaran of the Pancha Mahabhutas gives you the gross manifestation of this whole creation.
What are the three Mahagunas?
The three gunas are the Sattva, Rajas and Tamas.
Oh, okay.
So, Mahakali, Adishakti, manifests as Kali, the sum total of Tamas in this world parallel to Shiva. And Tara, the Sattva, complete white. And Shodashi, the red. Kali is the black, Tara is the white, Shodashi is the red. And when you understand, like you said, you heard a talk that I gave on chakra relationship. It's not directly chakra relationship, but easier to understand from that point of view. So when you see these 7 lokas, the chakras are lokas, 7 lokas. Beyond these 7 lokas, there are these 3 lokas where the control of gunas and control of all activity on earth is happening.
Okay, we'll have to pause it a little
Yes.
bit. So you're saying at the start there were 3 gunas.
Yes.
Which can be understood to be representing the 3 Devis that you just named.
Yes. So 3, the Mahavidya tradition says there are 3 above the crown. There are 3 above the crown. There are 3 points where these 3 gunas are controlling all the life on earth. Kali being the sum total of black, Tara being sum total of white, and Shodashi being sum total of the red. So their names also, in fact, have interpretations vis-a-vis these gunas, vis-a-vis so Kali itself means darkness. Total darkness out of which everything was born. There was total darkness out of which all has been created. So everything comes, she's parallel to Adi Shakti. She is Adi Shakti and she is the beginning of creation. So it's like creation, sustenance, dissolution and involution. The cycle starts with her and ends with her. Everything emerges out from her and merges back into her. This is what the Mahavidya sadhana teaches us. So from Kali comes out the white aspect, which is education, Tara, which is education, beauty, harmony, simplicity, music, art, everything. And then Shodashi, which is like absolute grandeur and royalty. that human beings deserve on earth. They deserve royalty and grandeur. That's why she's more popular. What we call Sri Vidya, as different sampradayas and different schools are teaching. Sri Vidya is nothing but the activation of Shodashi. Shodashi representing all the Devis. So each of the Mahavidyas is practiced by different sampradayas differently. One Mahavidya is picked up. For instance, we have sampradayas that are only into Kali Upasana. So Kali here is representing all the Devis. Similarly, the Tara has gone more to the Buddhism. Tara has travelled more to the Buddhist tradition. There also you have white Tara, black Tara, red Tara, blue Tara, green Tara. So Tara is representing all the Devis. And Shodashi, which is the Shri, which is also called Tripur Sundari, Raja Rajeshwari, right? This Devi is representing the sum total of Devis. And those who are doing the sadhana and upasana, they realize all the levels of this Devi.
Same as Kamakhya Devi?
Same as Kamakhya Devi. Kamakhya Devi is Kali personified. It's Kali basically. And in the Kamakhya Devi temple, you find the Pandits will tell you that there is Lakshmi here and there is Saraswati here. Basically, it is Shodashi and Tara there. It is Shodashi and Tara over there. And then on that hill, Guwahati, where Kamakhya is, all other Mahavidyas are there. All the temples of the Mahavidyas are there. So it is a representation of the whole culmination of all Devis merging into Kali, into Kamakhya.
Again, to understand this better, I have a personal question.
Yes.
I'm born in 1993 and I spent a majority of the 90s watching television and watching these Puranic shows, and that's my first education about what we know as Sanatana Dharma.
Yes.
I had never heard about the Mahavidyas until I turned 28 maybe, and I had someone on the show talk about it.
Yes.
So why didn't this knowledge visit me when I was a kid?
It does not visit many of the people, not just you. Mahavidyas therefore have been guhya. They're very powerful, extraordinarily powerful, and a person can become standalone energy. If you get into the worship of Mahavidyas, then you acquire the Shiva and the Shakti principle, both active and equal, and you stand alone, then you don't require anything else in this world. It's like the other in me has dissolved in me, and I am a standalone energy. So, from the Sanatana Dharma point of view, from the society point of view, this was entire family. The concept of everybody becoming a self-standing person is an entire family. Family tradition demands dependency, interdependency, dependency, good dependency, strengthening each other, supporting each other, living together. Whereas Mahavidyas were found dangerous by the traditional society. They were found dangerous because they were too strengthening. You
can extract power quickly?
Yes, very quickly. They're raw. I told you, they're very raw. You get darshan of Mahavidyas very easily. You start feeling the energy inside you very easily, etc. They're very raw. So the Kali, Tara and Shodashi were the representatives of these three gunas and all that is there on earth. They represent the Trigunatmak Prakriti completely. After that comes Bhuvaneshwari, which comes at the crown level. Bhuvaneshwari is the ruler of the Bhuvan, of the entire, and so she's manifested what Kali, Tara and Shodashi want.
I think this is also an important point in our episode to explain what chakras are, but more from a Reiki perspective or in the way that most people understand chakras.
Yeah, the seven, they're distribution points. Chakras are distribution points. They're vortices, we call them. They're propelling. Chakra means, literally word means wheel. Chakra means wheel, something that is moving constantly and propelling, channeling energy. So these 7 chakras in our body are 7 energy points, energy vortices that are actually distributing the cosmic energy that we are receiving. We are receiving life force energy. This is nothing self-generated. There's no doership. When you understand the science of this, Ranveer, there is no doership. It's all automated program, set right by God, and it's all happening. Who has seen the chakra or who programmed the chakra or who has taught the chakra to move in a certain way or to channel energy? Nobody has taught. God has taught. It's God created. So these chakras, these 7 realms are energy vortices. They are like distribution centers at different levels, starting from the root chakra. where the lower body is taken care of. Our lower body is completely taken care of by the root chakra. And then the Swadhisthana. So the energy, that means the root chakra energy center, we call it the Mooladhara chakra. This root chakra energy center is actually responsible for all the activities that are happening in the lower body. It provides energy, it propels energy, and sends energy to all the organ systems, physiological functions that are happening in the lower body. Right? Then you have the Swadhisthana, or the Hara, we call it Hara, or this is also called sacral chakra in energy language. This controls the lower ab part, your reproductive system, gynae area, and some part of the abdomen, lower abdomen, etc. And Swadhisthana is compared to the depth of the ocean. It's considered to be a very deep chakra. And this chakra is sending energy to all these parts of the body. So when you think about chakras or talk about chakra vis-a-vis the body, they're basically providing energy to all the physiological functions which are present in their jurisdicted area. All right. Swadhisthana is here. It's called a reproductive center also. And then Manipura. Manipura is the navel chakra. I'm talking very briefly because our episode is not about healing, that I could go deeper into the subject, but just a brief about the chakras. The Manipura, the navel chakra, takes care of this band, the abdomen, spleen, liver, pancreas, etc. over here. It provides energy for all the functions, physiological functions and organs. Anytime this chakra is imbalanced, we talk about chakra imbalances often, you hear people talking about this chakra is not good or this chakra is good. So when we say it's not good, that means it's not doing its duty to spread energy everywhere, and consequently the organs suffer. So solar plexus is called the power center, this is called the sex center, and this is called the earth center. These three chakras govern the realms of the earth. They govern the realms of the earth. That means all worldly living, all issues that are concerning our life on earth affect these three areas.
So the chakras exist within our body.
Within our body.
But they're also linked to the original loka that they belong to.
They are the trigger points to the connection point, trigger points to the different lokas, to the different galaxies, to the different gods and goddesses. They are like you're a hub, and these are the points that are connecting you to the entire universe.
Like antennas for different parts
of the universe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is also a biological aspect related to chakras in terms of from the healing perspective.
Yes, there's a physiological, biological energy perspective that we as healers talk about often. There is a mystic approach where in Mahavidyas we talk about this, that these Devis are actually elemental. They are like elemental because the chakras are also elemental. Pancha Mahabhutas have created this whole world. So everything has to be related to energy and to the element. Some things are fiery, some things are watery, some things are airy, like that. So the chakras also, there's an earth element down below, there's a water element in Swadhisthana, there's a fire element here. All right. Then the air element comes at the heart level. We call it the Anahat, or the heart level, takes care of this part of the body, and the air element is ruling here. So the Devis also are corresponding to these. I will come to the list of Devis after this. So after the heart element, then you have the throat chakra or the Vishuddhi. Here it is the Akasha Tattva. After the air element, it is Akash, that means ether. And Vishuddhi is where the purification of prana and all the energy is happening. All right. So when we come to Mahadevis, Mahavidyas, the Chinnamasta is here. She's slaughtered the head completely. And there is a purification of prana, and the Ida and the Pingla are flowing, with the Kundalini in complete activation. After the Akash Tattva is going at different levels till the crown. And beyond the crown, there are these three stations of Devi, the Kali, the Tara, and the Shodashi.
Okay.
Yeah.
If one takes a cosmic camera and places it in those lokas, what would one see? Because we're talking about 3 of the Guna chakras and then 7 other
chakras. Yes.
So we're talking about 10 different planes.
Yes.
That do not share physical space with our plane on Earth.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What would you see if you were there?
Nothing could be seen, can be felt. There's no gross reality outside. There are subtler realms. They're subtler realms. Nothing is visible, tangible. It doesn't have a
Difficult to place into words.
Yes, very difficult to place into words. It can be felt, sensed, and seen with the inner eye. Can be sensed, can be felt, and seen by the inner eye, heard by the inner shabda.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the happenings that take place on earth in terms of the thoughts of a very big political leader or someone dying because of a freak accident, the decisions are being made in those locus.
Vice versa, it works both ways. When someone thinks about destruction, this thought goes there, and it is accelerated, energized. It's like Hiranyagarbha. We talk about Hiranyagarbha. Hiranyagarbha is the womb of the universe, the collective thought and the collective mind of the universe. So in Hiranyagarbha, every thought is registered, and it starts becoming a reality.
Manifestation.
It starts manifesting over there. From there, so it comes back over here as a reality. So it's both ways. It's both ways traffic.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So there is an element of free human will.
Yes.
As well as the will of the deities.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Wow. Beautiful explanation. Now I'll let you continue.
So at the heart level, it is the air element, and at the throat level, it is the akasha, and it goes beyond to the crown level. So beyond this upper triangle, we call it the upper triangle. Inverted upper triangle is shown as Kali, Tara, and Shodashi. All right. This upper triangle starts manifesting in all these 7 lokas. It gets embedded in all these 7 lokas. That means that when Bhuvaneshwari is happening, when Bhuvaneshwari is seated here, there is a Kali and Tara and Shodashi in Bhuvaneshwari also. Right? Now let me talk about the Tantra aspect of it, because it's a tantric subject. Mahavidya itself is a tantric subject. So every Devi from here onwards, Bhuvaneshwari, then Chinnamasta, Bhairavi, Bhuvaneshwari, then Bhairavi, then Chinnamasta, Dhumavati, Baglamukhi, Matangi, and Kamlatmika. All of these Devis have this upper triangle residing in them. Therefore, all these Devis, all the prayogs that are done, can be in white, can be in red, and can be in black. Each of this can be invoked as a Tara, as white. Each of these can be invoked as Shodashi, as a red, for prosperity, business, etc. And each of them can be taken to the level of Kali. You see, this upper triangle is residing in all these 7 manifestations of Devi. So Bhuvaneshwari is worshipped also quite a lot, especially in South India. You see a lot of traditions. The Mahavidya tradition has survived in the South more than in the North. In the North, as I explore and as I go, I travel a lot to see the traditional temples and study. I love this subject. I see that the Mahavidyas are modernized in the North. They are modernized. In fact, in some of the traditional temples that are there, you see the old pictures are removed now, and a very feminine, domesticated Devi pictures are there, which is wearing a sari and jewels, and those pictures are put there. But the Mahavidyas were very raw. You see the old books that are written in museums. You see a naked Kali with her hair spread out in absolute freedom, and she is completely devoid of conditioning. There's no conditioning, and fiery, fierce, absolutely, wearing a garland of skulls around, and there is Varnamala written on the skulls, and she's very fiery. So people are not, in the history of Sanatan Dharma, domestication of Mahavidyas has happened. First, it was put into absolute guhya, into hiding, and as it is emerging, because people are asking about Mahavidyas, you see so much of it coming out now. When people are asking that the domesticated version is preferred, as an avatar of Durga and with a consort Shiva, and this is preferred. For bhakti, this is preferred. I am not pro, I am not against this, because for some reasons it's good. For some people it's good. For householders it's good. But when you attain into a yogic state of mind and you are pursuing these vidyas, then it goes into, it's not a woman, it's not a man. It's pure source of raw energy that you can harness.
Bracketed as a woman for the sake of the average human mind.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why not portray the Mahavidyas as men?
Because Shakti is feminine. Primarily, Shakti has come out of Shiva. You know, she's the moving energy. Shiva she is Paramatma only. See, the both aspects of Paramatma. One is a stationed potential energy form, and the other is moving kinetic energy form. So more akin to the feminine. That's why we depict it as Devis.
Gotcha. Not that I want to depict them as men.
Yeah.
That was just my curiosity speaking up. And I'll tell you the origin source of that curiosity. Rajarshi sir had said something like, basically the mantras come first. The
Yeah.
mantras have their own energy.
Yeah.
And for the mantras to be able to explain themselves to human minds, they portray themselves as human looking forms like a Devi or Devta.
Of course.
So it is the will of the energy within those mantras to portray themselves as women.
Yes.
Which makes me question a lot about human females and human males. Is the nature of being a female very different from the nature of being a male?
It isn't at a spiritual level. We are Ardhanareshwar. We are all Ardhanareshwar. We are our body is residing the residing energy there is that of Shiva and Shakti both. There's consciousness inside, which is the potential energy, and there's a whole energy field, gamut of energy field that we have, which is the Shakti. So we are all primarily by birth Ardhanareshwar, but the conditioning that we take on makes us believe us to be a man or a woman. When the awakening of the other in you happens, for instance, a biological man, when the awakening of the feminine happens, then he becomes more sensitive. His ego gets changed. His ego personality gets changed and he becomes more sensitive, and he's then housing both a male and a female. Not biologically, but spiritually.
And the female version of this?
Vice versa, she becomes bold and courageous and very much more than a man, in sense of her energy, in sense of her dynamism, in sense of her courage, fearlessness, etc. So a yogi then houses both Shiva and Shakti within him.
Which is the goal.
Okay.
Coming back to the Dash Mahavidyas. Dash, 10 Mahavidyas, great knowledge.
Yes.
And there are 10 chakras that we're speaking about.
Yes.
So 6 inside the body, 1 right above, and then
7 on the body, including the crown, and then the upper triangle, the 3 gunas above.
So as I am walking around the human world, I'm carrying all 10 chakras with me.
Yes, you're carrying all the 10 chakras. You're carrying the potential of these 10 Devis with you.
The potential. And Mahavidya sadhana is all about unlocking that potential. Okay. Now, based on what we spoke about in the last episode, the ultimate goal for humankind is to reconnect with the all-encompassing God that we call Paramatma.
Yes.
And deities like Krishna Bhagwan, Hanumanji, Shivji, Bhairav Baba, all these people help us
to go there.
All these energies help us to reach that Paramatma. When it comes to the Devis that you just spoke about, I am assuming that the 3 top Devis are the ones which are the most related to Paramatma and whose sadhana takes you to Paramatma the most fiercely. But does the worship of the other 7 also take you to the Paramatma?
100%. Each Devi is a doorway to Paramatma. Okay. Because the upper triangle is residing in all the Devis.
Okay.
The 3 aspects of the Devi, which is Kali, Tara and Shodash, is residing in all the Devis, and they're very fast. Therefore the sadhanas work here because they're very fast. It starts propelling immediately, Devi sadhana, Mahavidya sadhana, immediately starts propelling energy inside you.
Okay. What I understand about Mahavidya sadhana is that in the modern day, there's a lot of people using it for prayog in terms of the benefits of each of the individual Mahavidyas rather than using them as a tool for ultimate liberation.
Correct.
But my question to you is there a sadhana which includes worshipping all 10 in order to get to some end result?
Yeah, all 10 are encouraged. People like me do it for exploring the Devis. For instance, when my students learn Mahavidya sadhana with me, we make them do a whole circuit of all the Devis mantra japa, dhyana, etc., for them to understand and realize which of the Devi is calling them. Because we all have different prakriti. All of us have different prakriti, different nature. One cannot be said better than the other. We are all good. But there is a calling for a certain, just like how you have a calling for a certain color or for a certain taste or smell, all of us have choices. In the same way, when you visit all the 10 Mahavidyas, you get a calling from a particular Devi. It is almost like she is telling you that I will help you go there.
And how do you?
When you do the entire sequence, it comes on its own. Yeah.
How is Ganesha linked to the Dash Mahavidyas?
Ganesha in our sampradaya, in my sampradaya, because the Devi sits in his lap, we are from ages, all the other people and my soul, which was there incarnated in earlier ages, we've always done this sadhana of Devi and Ganesha together. In the Devi tradition also, be it Sri Vidya or be it any other Kali Upasana, Ganesha is considered to be the removal of obstacle and protector that nobody comes in the path of your sadhana. So Ganesha invocation helps you to do the siddhi of a Devi very easily. That's why a lot of people do at least one mala of Ganesh mantra whenever they are doing Devi sadhana.
What Ganesh mantra?
Any Ganesh mantra. In our sampradaya, we have a long Ganesh Mahaganpati Mula mantra, and I've given it to you on the dupatta that I've given you, on the stole that I gave you. It's printed. It's an old Mahaganpati Mula mantra available everywhere. We don't normally pronounce it like this or on the show. The mantra is not supposed to be said like this it's a long mantra, but it's a beautiful mantra.
Why is it? I've seen Rajarshi sir do this as well. Like he's not willing to say certain words or chant certain mantras.
Because we do Purascharans and Anushtans for many years now, of the mantra. So mantra becomes siddha in our system. You're not supposed to, it's like giving a lot of reverence and respect, that you're not just casually flaunting it here and there to impress the audience or to show how good I am at that mantra or whatever. It's in humility, in surrender and submission that it is kept quiet. Yeah. It's not that it's a secret. It's not a secret. You can find Mahaganpati Mool Mantra anywhere. You Google and you'll find it. It's not that it's a secret. It's not that it shouldn't be given to people. It's that we don't say it to flaunt it or to utilize it for our showcasting it, Yeah.
Getting back into the Mahavidya conversation, I don't know what question to ask you next to forward the conversation because I don't know where to begin.
Yeah.
So I actually hand it over to you and then I'll stop you wherever I have a question.
Yeah. Most of the Mahavidyas, minus the 3 which are down, the ones that come from Baglamukhi, Matangi and Kamlatmika, they're very worldly. They're very worldly Vidyas. And they are pursued by sadhaks for siddhis and for magical abilities and for... So it's a play for God. Energy is a play for God, and in this creation, all these magical, mystical things that you see, these are all games and toys for God. This is what I have understood out of this. These are games for us to play, but play with Him. These are games that we can play, but play with Him. If He gives us an ability to see through or to hear through or to do something, it's for us to play with Him and not to create an identity. Dissolving the identity is the goal of any sadhana. Any sadhana. You name it. Dissolving our identity into God is the goal. If that is the goal, how seriously should I take these distractions that come on the path? There are many distractions that come on the path. The gifts that are given to you are not for you to keep in the locker or are not for you to encash or are not for you to gain power with, but they are to give it back to God.
How do you give it back to God if He's gifting you with siddhis? You then attach all of your karma, all of your work with Paramatma, right?
Thy will be done, thy kingdom be. बोलते हैं ना, thy will be done. So if it's His will, He will make me use the siddhi somewhere where it is right. In a surrendered mode, to use the siddhis when it is appropriate, in a surrendered mode, and the level of awareness should be so high. Level of awareness, the me in me that watches the me all the time, should be so high that you should understand whether it is a prank that my ego is playing, okay, show it off now, or do it off now, or is it coming as something which is just happening and I'm seeing it is happening. When I, as a witness, see that something is happening through me, then I know that I'm not doing it. Somebody is just, God is making me do it.
Flow state.
It's flowing, but if I find my head manipulating, thinking, crafting, that's why it's called witchcraft. My brain is crafting now something, and I want to play a show somewhere. Then it's abuse of that siddhi, and that's not what it was given to you for.
Comfortable talking about siddhis a little bit?
Yes, why not?
When we say Hanumanji is Ashta Siddhi no Nidhi ke Data, firstly, what does that statement mean? And secondly, are there 8 siddhis only, or are there infinite number of siddhis?
There are infinite number of siddhis.
And what could be a very understandable siddhi for someone who's never heard the term siddhi?
It's actualization. When we talk about a group of cells, a colony of cells, okay? When you talk about a group of cells or a colony of cells, when there is actualization and maximization of consciousness completely in full form, then the Shakti there, Siddhi word is related to Shakti. It's not related to consciousness. It's related to Shakti, because that means that Shakti is come in its full form, like a player comes in its full form, right? So that means you have actualized and maximized that Shakti point over there. So group of cells now are holding on to a maximum ability of the Shakti. And this can be pushed anywhere. It can be pushed anywhere. So, the sadhak realizes that he is got a siddhi. First of all, wo hota nahi hai. Rarely it happens because he's in so much humility. If he's a real sadhak, he's in so much humility. There are set of people who are pursuing siddhis, and they're doing sadhana only for the sake of siddhi, which happens or may not happen. It may happen or it may not happen. But if a sadhak is sincere and on his path is amalgamating and melting his ego, and on the sadhana his attention is not on the siddhis come to him anyway. Siddhis come to him anyway. It's a byproduct of self-actualization. One colony of cells getting activated in the body is like one siddhi. And the aim being that the whole body has become completely activated, with that energy.
Fair to say that our human body, mind and spirit holds much more potential that we're told in textbooks.
Yes.
So there are siddhis packed into each one of our bodies, minds and souls.
Yes.
But for the ones who align themselves with the practices, you actually end up seeing those siddhis manifest as realities.
Yeah, and the Ashta Siddhis and these names that you hear of the siddhis, these are coming from our traditional scriptural books. So there is a limit to what is written there. There's much more in the universe than that. Much more that doesn't have a nomenclature yet. Correct? Much more that can be named in future.
What is an understandable siddhi that you can talk about so that people have a context on what this is?
The simplest of the siddhi is a Vak Siddhi. When you're doing Nam Smaran, Nam Japa, and you're doing your bhakti regularly, meditation regularly, and following the yamas, niyamas, choosing a right way of life, coming more in discipline, making conscious choices, you get Vak Siddhi. It's the easiest siddhi. Vak Siddhi is the power of speech. The colony of cells here get activated, they get divinized, the chakra gets divinized. Whatever you say comes true. Vak Siddhi is whatever you say comes true. It has to manifest because it becomes the power. It becomes a command that the universe has to accept.
Okay.
So that's one of the easiest one. Then manifestation, some people have more manifesting power than others. So those who are, again, everything is related to discipline and practice. For some people are born with these siddhis. For example, if someone was a sadhak in his previous lifetime and had done a lot of tapasya, and had worked, on all his energy system, and let's say his body ended, that life ended. Now he's born again, a newborn. He's born with that, it's carry forward. He's born with all of that attainment that he had in his previous lifetime. And as a kid, he's born with siddhis. You see so many youngsters, you see the miraculous children everywhere. Young, small boys and girls, So they're born with their siddhis. And so this lifetime is a very limitation to understand. Very big limitation. Here we get confused. A common man would get confused. Why he? Why not me? He did this for just 1 year and he has reached somewhere. I'm doing it for 8 years. I have not reached anywhere. His previous account is not taken into calculation. For instance, you have Maharathis, Rishis like Raman Maharshi and many other saints. From childhood they've been saintly. They've been saintly and they have born with the wisdom of an 80-year-old man or a very, very awakened man. What's the partiality God is doing here? That someone is born with this light and someone is not born with the light and born with darkness in the head. What is this partiality? It's nothing. There's no partiality. Everything goes in law and order here. There's a perfect order in the universe. There's a law of cause and effect that is working, and the accounts are maintained flawlessly without any error. The human body, in fact, is a flawless machine. Automated, flawless machine where everything is happening automatically without your conscious interference in it. Your digestive system is working, excretory system is working, circulatory system is working. There is such minuscule, minute detailing in all these processes. We don't even have the ability to understand these processes fully, leave aside having any control over it.
I don't know why I'm asking you this question, but whenever we have these spiritual conversations, we're usually talking about subjects where the context is age 0 to age 80 or 90 when you pass away. What about the phase of time which happens after you pass away? In terms of if you've done the sadhana throughout your life, but you've not reached enlightenment, you got to come back to this realm. So between the next birth and this birth, while you're spending time up there or down there, do you get to interact with the deities?
This also, two schools of thought, the Dvait and the Advait, think differently about this. The soul has been different from the whole gamut of consciousness. Itself is a Dvait perspective where it travels and goes to different realms and goes through 4 heavens and then is coming back on the earth, etc. The stories and the explanation as written in the Puranas, different scriptures, different Puranas talk about the different journeys of the soul, after death. Advaita, which is non-dual consciousness, talks about there's a screen, there's consciousness. Okay? Now, there's a ring, imagine a ring, which is your causal body, which is your destiny. Let's say it's colored red and blue. In this life, your causal body is colored red and blue, your story is red and blue. You're living this life. And you're doing some purushat, you're doing podcast and you're doing this and you're doing a lot of good work for people. You're enlightening your masses and your fan followings. And so all of this is adding some golden color to your red and blue. All right. And if there's any bad, some black spots are added to it. Okay. Now your lifetime gets over. Physical lifetime gets over. You shed this body. It's only dropping down the body just like you would drop a shirt. You just drop this body. This ring is not moving anywhere. This ring is here. And in the backdrop of this ring, there's pure consciousness, pure light. Now for the next lifetime, next human embodiment, this ring color changes a little. The soul chooses to play a different role, a different script. And these black spots will remain here. These golden that you did will remain here. And now the color of the ring is coming, say, pink and green. Consciousness, that means the backdrop is not changing at all. Consciousness is remaining. That means here we are 4 people. There are no 4 Brahmans. There's one Brahman in which 4 rings are operating. Do you get it?
Yes.
So when I leave this body, my body will be discarded and back to nature, and this ring will embody another body in the form of a baby and will grow. This ring will remain in this body for as long as the body will live. So there's no question of losing data. Number 1. There's no question of losing data. The data is there. It's there. And you can tap into this data as much as you want. For instance, wisdom. All the golden that you've earned in this lifetime, let's say in the next lifetime, you've forgotten about it. You can tap into it and revive this golden. This power, this gleam, this shine that people who are into yoga or into spirituality, into mysticism, this glow and that gleam that you see on their faces and in their aura is nothing but the old reviving and coming and surfacing into the present life, which everybody has. Everybody has.
Okay, back to the Mahavidyas.
Yes.
Answered my tangent.
So, the three lower Mahavidyas, Baglamukhi, Matangi, are full of magic, mysticism. That's why maximum prayogs are done with these.
Baglamukhi, Matangi and
Kamalatmika.
Kamalatmika.
Yeah, Kamalatmika is akin to Lakshmi. Mahalakshmi.
Okay.
Kamalatmika is just like Mahalakshmi, seated on a lotus. And so she gives you the siddhi of wealth and, everything. And Matangi is absolutely beautiful, crafty Devi, the parrot sitting with her, and she's often depicted with a veena, and she's dark, and she's called Uchishta Devi. Uchishta Devi matlab, she is one of the Devis that you worship her in any way she will accept it. With a lot of Devis, there are a lot of rituals that people are very careful about, cleanliness and hygiene and left hand and right hand and this vastra and that vastra. Matangi is one Devi that will accept whatever you do. There's a very beautiful South Indian movie in which there is a Devi shown, looks like Matangi to me. And there is a big pandal and a big function happening in that home because they were calling somebody like Shankaracharya status person to come and do the worship of that Devi. So Panchabhog and so much of prasad and everything was done. In that house there was a servant maid, who is working, and she is in love with the Devi. But she's obviously not allowed to come there and do things because she's a worker. So she, in her small plate, does everything what the pujari was doing. Giving prasad, giving this, then she was tasting and seeing if that what little thing she made was good or not. And they show that when the invocation actually happens, the Devi is not sitting in that pratima which is there. She comes and sits in her plate. It's a very beautiful depiction. It's a story, but the ethos is very clear that Devis respond to love and sincerity, especially the Mahavidyas. They respond to love, sincerity, and ardent desire to be with her, ardent desire to be with her, to see her darshan, and she responds. So Mahavidyas, the school that I belong to, there is no formality. It should be just done intense sadhana with meditation and mantra. Intense sadhana with meditation and mantra, and that's it. But there are schools, other schools, Sri Vidya, for instance, we have a lot of schools here in India. So down south you have, in the east of India, in the north east also, Sri Vidya is very popular. Sri Vidya is Shodashi, and that is Tripur Sundari, the pyramid that you see, the Shri Yantra puja, what you see, the Shri Yantra. Shri Yantra is a three-dimensional picture of the yantra that can be even flat. The yantras, we have three kinds of yantras. You have a flat, Bhuprushta we call it. Then there is Kurma Prushta, that means it's like a tortoise, like a semi-circle, And then you have a Meru, or a mountain, like the way the Shri Yantra is, So the Sri Vidya tradition has evolved quite a lot in India. We have some very dynamic, very powerful, very good schools down south in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, which impart Sri Vidya. Mahavidyas is such an open school, it's such an open faith that one could develop his own system according to the guidance of his master mentor. He can develop his own system of worship. Even in the Sri Vidya schools which are existingly there are different ways of doing the worship. Some people take the support from Lalita Sahasranam. Some people take the support from Khargamala. There are others towards Assam side and Calcutta side where it's completely different. So it's not the last word. Belonging to a sampradaya is like belonging to a family where a certain way of living is followed. Right? Yeah.
Okay. Let's speak about these three. You spoke about Matangi right now.
Yeah.
But what is the associated siddhi?
Craft, Mohini sadhana, Vashikaran. All of this goes with Matangi sadhana. And basically because she's a mesmerizing Devi. She's a Devi that can mesmerize, and she's a Devi that can give you power to mesmerize. So my take on this is, what is my take back of the sadhanas that I have done with the Devis, is that exploring her love factor. And if you can experience Matangi in you, you get her craft in your hands. Anything you touch can be divinized. Anything you make can be divinized. I explore my energy. I live in the hermitage. I live on my own, and I live in isolation. And I work with stones, with plants, with herbs, with so many things. I made a very beautiful candle for you and brought it. Yes, with lot of mantras in it. I explored this. So it's manifestation of the Devi energy in every iota and part and every grain of your living is the true utility of this Devi. To play these games that can very easily get hooked onto your ego, like things like Vashikaran and things like, mesmerizing someone or taking someone's mind in control, how good would that be?
There's karma.
It is too
associated.
complicated. It's too complicated. When you're a real sadhak, then you want to shed off your karmic patterns rather than pile on more.
And any kind of interaction with another human being, whether positive or negative, will create karma.
Yeah, 100%.
Like even if I'm having a 2-sentence conversation with someone, that will create.
100% an intention. Forget about conversation. Even if you have an intention in your heart to utilize this for something, that has also created karma. Even thought creates karma. In fact, thought creates more karma than action.
Really?
Yes. Thought creates more karma than action. An unevolved, ignorant person, if he goes and slaps a boy on the street, it will create a karma, but not as bad as if I visualize that I'm going and slapping that boy. Just visualize. Or have an intention, I want to go and slap that boy. It's created a bigger karma seed than the man who has actually gone and slapped him.
Why though? Because you're not causing physical harm by thought.
Thought is a wave, is a vibration.
Nazar.
Thought is a wave, is a vibration, just like bad nazar is.
It's like you're putting nazar on that boy.
On that boy. Or more than that, you're evolved. See, anybody who is doing prayog or is wanting to experiment with these things is obviously an evolved person, evolved soul, right? An ordinary man wouldn't want to do anything. Okay, he's a helpless, living an ordinary life. So, an evolved person having the intention to control someone in itself is a huge karma creation. This goes into the Hiranyagarbha. It's like, in very ordinary language, if a poor man on the street, a beggar, a rickshawala, or someone just picks up 100 rupees from someone's pocket, he robs, let's say, 100 rupees from someone's pocket, it will create a karma. But it won't create such a big karma as much as if I go and pick up 100 rupees from someone's purse. When you are evolved a soul and you're born with awareness and you've been blessed with the higher, deeper knowing of the universe, and you can see the substratum and you can lift up and look into the karma cycle and the cause and the effect, with this deep understanding, if you do a petty something, it creates a huge karma.
The higher you climb, the harder you'll fall.
That's it.
Okay. We spoke about Matangi right now. So
Yes.
Associated with craft and...
Yeah, Mohini sadhana mostly, Vashikaran, Mohini sadhana, and also a lot of small fragments of these sadhanas, these prayogs are done. They prepare tavis and they prepare, all kinds of things to eat, etc. They're all fragments of these two sadhanas, basically.
If you want to pursue, say, Goddess Matangi to a very deep degree, how much time do you have to dedicate?
Depends on your soul's back journey. For instance, it doesn't take any time for me because I think I'm only living my past lives. मेरे को इस life में तो मैंने ज़्यादा मेहनत करी नहीं है. I haven't worked very hard in this life.
You really think so?
Huh?
Despite living alone, doing sadhana?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the sadhana would entail an elaborate mantra?
Yes, for sure it has mantra and meditation as a part of it. Control of food, timings, control of food, diet control, timings, go with the rhythm of the nature, go with the rhythm of the nature. And these are all supporting systems. See, a yogi who's living in the forest and doing Matangi sadhana, let's say, may not do all of these things. For him, just the mantra and dhyana is enough.
For how long?
Years together.
And probably hours daily.
Yeah. But it's like you can't approximate this because somebody who's carrying forward a previous life balance with him few months could be enough for him to trigger that wisdom and trigger that energy which was already there in him.
How does one know if the energy has been triggered?
पता चल जाता है. It can't be explained in words.
Maybe a dream, maybe
There is a realization of something inside. It's like I know but I can't explain it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, what was the lowest chakra one?
Kamlatmika is like Lakshmi, goddess of earthly wealth and money and prosperity and everything. So Kamlatmika has mostly dissolved into the form of Lakshmi, which is in the present day. Nobody is doing special sadhanas for Kamlatmika per se.
Really?
Yeah. It's almost like, taken as the other Lakshmi sadhana. We do Sri Suktam, or we do, Kanka Mahalakshmi Stotra, or so many others. So she is almost like amalgamated with the modern day Lakshmi. Yeah.
Okay. So when we say Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth,
Yeah.
praying to her will attract wealth of different
Yes,
kinds.
of course. Of course it will.
Okay. Baglamukhi.
Yes. So Baglamukhi comes from the solar plexus. Obviously fire energy of will, energy of power. So she's a Stamban Shakti. Baglamukhi is Stamban Shakti. She can stop anything. It can come with the solar power. The power of the solar plexus. That yellow and that blazing fire is what Baglamukhi is depicted as. And that's why she is a specialist at stopping something. And all the Uchchatanmar and all prayogs are done. Matangi and Baglamukhi both are utilized in this. So the lower three chakras, a lot of work is done. A lot of earthly work is done. The other ones, higher ones, are mostly utilized for transcendence and for higher attainments.
But if there are 100 human beings hypothetically who are practicing the sadhanas of the three lower devis, what is their intention usually? Like, I'm sure 100 out of 100 are not utilizing it for spiritual.
Mostly it is curiosity.
Okay.
Mostly it is curiosity. Kya hai dekhenge? Let us see what it is. And curiosity, spiritual curiosity more so. Also, as a sadhak, my observation is this, I may be wrong. As a sadhak is growing, as you're growing, there are many others watching you. There are many others looking at you. There are many others who are close to you. And they may be wanting to also try and do things that you're doing. So a lot of borrowed desires is a very big bimari, is a very big disease.
Borrowed desire?
Yeah. I this is my phrase, my personal phrase. I haven't read it anywhere. Borrowed desires is like you see someone being successful flying a kite. Okay, now you'll see 100 people more flying kites. It's like, you're doing a good podcast. There are many others who are wanting to be just the way you are, Similarly, me, what a wonderful life, but they don't know what life I go through, living up on the mountain alone. It's like, so a lot of borrowed desires. Many people who are on this path, let's say 100 of them that you said, are out of curiosity and a borrowed curiosity of not really wanting neither the goddess nor the Shiva.
What is the right intention with wanting to do the sadhana then?
You should be ready to die to be there.
Want it as much as you want to breathe.
You should be ready to dissolve yourself and let her be. So that and no God realization can happen without you dying as an ego. It can't happen.
If one does any of these Mahavidya sadhanas correctly, and correctly is a subjective term. But
yes.
If one does it with complete faith, penance, etc., what is the end result?
End result is a darshan and realization of that energy in you. It's in you that you realize. For instance, I've loved Matangi for a long time, and she just appears everywhere to me.
Just out of your bhakti for her?
Yes, just out of a bhakti for her.
Can you look at someone and get to know them a little bit and tell them that, hey, this is the Mahavidya you should be?
Yeah, immediately.
Okay. We'll be speaking after the podcast. Anything else you want to say about Baglamukhi?
She is considered very dangerous. That's why people are dangerous in the sense that very fiery. So touch me not until you are very sure about it and very dedicated.
Why?
Because it's a fiery energy, and a lot of negative prayogs are done. More of negative prayogs are done with her. So people are scared to come into her bhakti. Those who have come into the bhakti have come into the bhakti because they've been blessed with something that was successful and granted for them at some point. Somebody wanted to win a court case, and he did some sadhana or baglamukhi, went somewhere and some pandit did a puja for him or her, and the court case was through, and then he became an eternal bhakt of baglamukhi. Many of them are into bhakti like that. Few of them, rarely, and they are really worthy, that they just have a liking for her. They just have an attraction for her. They just have a, something is pulling to me to her for no reason. That is true bhakti. That is true attraction, and that is a calling, true calling. So the sadhana should be done, coming back to the statement again, the sadhana should be done to befriend the Shakti, to realize her in you, and to get a realization, actualization, or a darshan. That should be the reason. Baki to sab aa hi jayega.
Gotcha. Moving on to the upper chakra.
To the Dhumavati. From here, the centers, the vortices. These three are the worldly vortices, and these are the psychological and the upper world vortices, chakras. So Dhumavati, corresponds to the air element. That's why she's depicted grey and very depressive, which is a very, very distracting picture of hers. She's actually ocean of love. She can remove poverty completely. She can remove grief completely. She can remove, but people are very scared to enter into her because she's depicted like that, like a widow, like a very scary figure with, no color. In her yantras also, there's no color. There's just a grey. And in fact, many temples, even if you go to Kamakhya, they say the Dhumavati, nobody goes. A lot of our temple traditions which are there, they discourage people to take darshan of Dhumavati.
I've had people discourage Dhumavati worship on the show as well.
Yeah, so, but she is really an ocean of love. I went to the Baglamukhi temple at in Madhya Pradesh, Datia. There's a beautiful Baglamukhi temple at Datia. I'd gone with one of my friends and students. When we were coming out of the temple after doing the puja and everything, there's a Dhumavati temple there. So the Pandit told us कि माता जी आप वहाँ मत जाइए, बस आपको मैंने बोला दर्शन तो ले ले माँ का, तो मैंने नहीं खिड़की से ले, you just look into the peep through the window and that's it. I mean, he was discouraging us to even go there. So we kept his honor, okay, because ठीक है, if he's saying don't go. We just came back to our car. A huge crow that I never seen in my life, such a huge crow, came and sat on our car. So it is as if she came, and crow is a vahan for Dhumavati. It is as if she came and she said, okay, you're not coming, I'm coming. So these are very subtle indications. For a common man who is very logical and very, brain-oriented, intellectual, he may not even give any importance to such an event. What is there? What is so big about a crow coming and sitting on your car? But when it is coming as a coincidence, when you are not going to the temple and suddenly out of nowhere, such a big crow, the size of the crow was amazing. And we were three of us, and we three were wide-eyed, jaw-dropped, looking at the crow. Because we all understood three in our hearts that here she is. So, they manifest around you. So, Dhumavati is an ocean of compassion. Very, very beautiful. So, as a therapist and as a person who is into Mahavidya sadhanas, we recommend Dhumavati's mantra rarely. Only when somebody is grief-stricken for long, into deep depression or grief-stricken and just doesn't find any light in life. Then Dhumavati is given as a very antidote for a very short while. And then there are tantric practitioners that do the Siddhi of Dhumavati also for Prayog. Chinnamasta and Dhumavati also have a set of Prayogs that are, popular.
Use for what?
For all of this that we spoke about, mesmerizing games and playing with the toys that God has given us.
Okay.
The two extremes of people that do her sadhana, ones that want to extract the power, and utilize the power for different kinds of experiments that they want to do, and the other who are wanting a healing, a deep healing. She's a great healer, Dhumavati. She can actually remove povertized conditions in all levels, material, emotional levels, So she's a healer. And air element, so air element itself creates a lot of change. Invoking her is like invoking the air element, Vayu.
It's said that when you begin any kind of deity upasana, like when you pray to a particular deity, you get traits of that deity.
Yeah.
Which is why I think people fear praying to Dhumavati.
Yeah.
That will you also become a widow? Will you also start aging?
That's the negative bit of conditioning which is there. That's a negative bit of conditioning which is there, which is not true. They are not in human forms. The Devis are not in human forms. They are huge energy portals and they create energy movement. So the depiction as women is only symbolic of the characteristics and elemental depiction, rather. The yellow in Baglamukhi is all about the fire element. It's not that she's a woman who likes yellow. It's not like that. Similarly, the Devi is the Bhuvaneshwari, their shoulder, she is depicted with red. It's more symbolic to the, to the Rajas. Rajasic energy is depicted by red often because it has a lot of attraction and a lot of abundance within itself. So they are depicted like that. It's not that they are any kind of women. So even when we say we are getting a darshan, suppose I say that I have a darshan of Matangi, it's actually a projection of my mind. There is my energy system and my mind projecting into a Devi that is so real in front of me. So it's my creation, basically. She is not coming in any form anywhere like that. The energy is supporting, undoubtedly she's supporting, which is why we say Devi has given me darshan. I don't say that I have created a darshan. So Devi has given me a darshan because it's something that I couldn't do, it has happened. However, it's a projection from your own pranic system, and when you understand the science of it, you understand it very deeply that it's a projection of your pranic system, and the maruts of your body are coming outside and giving you the darshan.
Wow.
Yeah, they're giving you the darshan. It's only for your eyes.
It's a state of being hyper-tuned again.
Very hyper-tuned, and it's like a prasad. It's like a reward system that your energy and your consciousness inside is giving you for your sheer dedication and devotion.
It's like if you work out long enough and eat cleanly, you'll see abs one day.
Yes, like that.
To trivialize it.
At a very gross level. Good example.
Moving on.
Yeah, then after Dhumavati, then you have the Chinnamasta. The picture of Chinnamasta is depicted in the Mahavidya books, whatever. Few books we have, we don't have many. Westerners have written, coincidentally, more books on Mahavidya than Indians. And Indian books are all full of prayog and everything because the focus is different. The focus in the Western world is all about research and inquiry. They've not written anything much about prayogs. Indian books have written more about prayogs because this is where the application of the Mahavidyas is cornered. I would say cornered because it's not taking into a bhakti level. So Chinnamasta is depicted as a decapitated. She's got a cut off head, chopped off head, and she's holding her head in her own hand, oozing out blood. And then there are fountains of 3 fountains oozing out from her. They are said to be Da Pingla and the Sushamna. The energy fountains, they're actually energy fountains. They're not blood. They are not blood. And then there are 2 Dakinis who are drinking this. The Dakinis are the cosmic powers. And Chinnamasta, is standing over a copulating couple. She's standing on a copulating couple. In the Puranas, it is written as Rati and Kama. She's standing on this. So basically, the symbolism involved here is that complete control over your ego. Cutting off the head in all the Mahavidyas, cutting or chopping the head is like chopping the head of the ego. And energizing, bringing your energy system to an optimized level, winning over desire. Standing on the copulated couple is like saying she's won over desire. Every kind of lust and desire. So it's a highest attainment, it's a spiritual attainment, and it corresponds to the Akash Tattva. Corresponds to the ether to which all the other elements are born. Akash, Vayu, Agni, Apa, Prithvi. They're born to Akash. So she is at the apex of the elemental sequence, and at the having attained that level of detachment, cutting cords with everything, and highest yogic attainment. Chinnamasta. Again, Chinnamasta is utilized as a therapy. The Devi mantra and sadhana is utilized as a therapy for someone who is in the middle of a mess and wants to get detached. Also, addictions of all kinds, physical level addictions, alcoholism, drug, all of this. Also, relationship addictions, all kinds of addiction, to win over desire at all levels, physical, emotional, and other. Then beyond this, then we come to Bhairavi. It's at par with Bhairav. Bhairavi and Bhairav, they are the same. They aren't different. The pravaha, here is the force of Shiva. Jatati vigalajwala pravaha pavitastale. This thing says, so pravaha is the force of the maruts. Maruts are also residing in all 7 chakras.
What is that?
We'll talk about it in another discussion that we'll do with Hanuman. When I come the next time, we'll do it. So Marut is a very big subject, which is there in our, tradition. So the name of the Marut that comes from here is Pravaha. Pravaha is like a fiery force. So Bhairavi is at this level. Her. When we say it doesn't mean she's residing here in there. No. The vibrational frequencies are parallel, are corresponding. Like we have corresponding colors, corresponding aromas, chakra correspondence is there at so many levels. Flowers that correspond to the chakras, vegetables and fruits that correspond to the chakras, colors, aromas, oils. Isi tarah, in the same way the goddesses are corresponding to this energy frequency when you understand and look at it from the energy point of view. So Bhairavi is like, she's shown in the Smashana again, and doing sadhana fiery. Her face is quite familiar to that of Kali, with absolute brazen hair, and body is nude. And so she is like Bhuton ki Swami. She's like the goddess of all the other worlds and has all the powers in her control. She's like Shiva, she's like Bhairav, just like how Bhairav is described. Bhairavi is here. So sicknesses, getting over sicknesses. She's also the controller of our prana system. So any issues with the pranic system, respiratory issues, etc., Bhairavi is taken care of. Bhairavi can take care of. She's used as, her mantra is used as a therapy. In our sampradaya, in Gurudev's teachings, all these Mahavidyas are taught as healing arts. Different Mahavidyas for different healing streams, for different kinds of issues and problems that people would face.
White Prayog.
White Prayog. White and red sometimes, for prosperity. When you have a family, you need sustenance. When you need sustenance, you need money and you need facilities, so that comes under red. To increase your business turnover or to, resolve your financial obstacles or to attain in education or success, more focus and concentration in your work, etc. That's all red Prayog. So Bhairavi is invoked for diseases, deadly diseases, and also to get rid of evil energy and evil unseen dangers that come from other dimensions, so she is invoked for that.
Can we talk about unseen evils that come from different dimensions?
A little bit, maybe, yes. So
over to you.
Yeah. My Gurudev, always said to me that bring people in faith, astha, shraddha, and love. And it's not important for us to see the dark. So I love following his, advice. And having known all the other dimensions that one can talk about, if it's not going to help anyone, why to talk about it?
Okay, fair.
And if it creates fear, why to talk about it? I can give you a very small example of the unseen. Very small example. I was doing a Kali sadhana. And I keep experimenting a lot with mantras, and because I have all time in hand, so I was experimenting with the Kali sadhana sitting on my sofa. Our hermitage is bang on the Ganga. It's on the bank of Ganga, and you can see the Ganga, 70 mm, full panoramic view of the Ganga. So I was doing my mantra japa and I'm looking at the Ganga, and suddenly the thought crossed my mind, oh, the AC is on and you're sitting comfortably in this room doing the sadhana, and there are people sitting in the smashan and doing it. You should be sitting in the smashan and doing the sadhana. Mahavidya sadhanas are done, a lot of them, in crude natural places, guhya places, like the cremation ground or caves and riverbeds, etc. So I'm just joked with myself and I said, you're doing Kali sadhana and the comfort of a sofa and an AC, and you should be sitting there. And so just in the 60 degrees view of our hermitage down there, there is a cremation ground where the local villagers come and burn the bodies when they're dead. So I'm looking there and I'm saying this in my head. And within a few minutes, could be 10-15 minutes, I see 2-3 bodies have come there and they were blazing. They were put on fire and they were blazing. It was as if goddess is giving me, okay, an assurance that you're okay sitting there and doing it. Here I am, I'm showing you the smashan. And after these bodies left, and because I was sitting there, I was so fascinated with the whole coincidence. After the bodies, were burnt and these people left, all the people left, in the subtler world, because, the auric vision is very sharp, I can almost sense and see a lot of things. I saw a huge crowd sitting there of images sitting there. And it was as if there was a cosmic acknowledgement for what I was doing. So, they're very subtle things and may sound stupid to people who are very logical. It may actually sound very stupid. So we don't even narrate these things to a lot of people because it's beyond their understanding. And why become a stock for laughter or for... So we don't share. These are our experiences and we take them seriously. So the entire topic of what you said is something that is a personal experience for most of the people who would narrate things that somebody saw this or this or this, or somebody heard this, or knows about these realms and all. It's all personal experiences and they're true to them. Yeah.
You know how in Islam they speak about farishte, or in Christianity they speak about angels? What is the Sanatani equivalent of?
The one that is above is Gandharvas. We call them Gandharvas. Gandharvas are like angels, what the Western world calls angels. And they are living subtle bodies that have primary responsibility to create heaven on earth. So they support you for all celebration, creativity. All songs, lyrics, everything is downloaded from the Gandharva Loka. All tunes that come, they come from the Gandharva. If you're an artist, one Gandharva will adopt you and will constantly give you. That's why we get a particular flair or a particular style of writing or a particular style of painting in a person. It's not that he can't do it any other way, but the Gandharva makes him do it that way, becomes his signature style. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Whether it is in music or in art, any other form. So Gandharvas are there to make life on earth heavenly. And they support you in celebration, etc., etc. But above that is Yaksha Lok, or Kinnaras, we say Yakshas, and the realms of your ancestors and masters. Realms of your ancestors, masters, and archangels, what the Western world calls archangels. I'm not aware of the Islamic words for these, okay? The archangels and masters. So these are like heading huge groups of Gandharvas. They guide and they, delegate work on earth.
They're the leaders of the Gandharvas.
They're the leaders of the lower realm.
Like Archangel Christopher, Archangel
Michael, Metatron, all of these. So they're leading and sending the lower this to help humanity again.
What do we call it in Hinduism?
Yakshas, Kinnaras, and the Guru Tattva comes from here.
And they're all positive?
Most of them are. There's a parallel negative realm I'll talk about.
Sure.
Right now. Let me finish this
Yes.
first. Yeah. So the Yakshas, and it's an important strata because all our knowledge, wisdom channels through this. So if you are interested in Bhagavad Gita, for instance, and you have a sincere quest to study, a Yaksha or a master, or this is a master's realm. All the ascended masters are living here. Through them, the knowledge, wisdom, past experiences, everything is available here on earth. So they channel. And through the Gandharvas and through direct channels sometimes, but what we say, download. You go in meditation and you download and you hear dialogues or you write down something, messages. All of this happens from this realm. Above this is Devas, what we call gods and goddesses, the highest of the realm, beyond which is pure consciousness. All right. So in the Devas, you have all the Devas, gods and goddesses that you can talk about from any cultures of the world. They come in this strata. This is the highest strata, closest to the pure consciousness, Paramatma. Now, on the lower side, human, above the human, there's Gandharvas, Yakshas, and Devas. Below the Asuras are there immediately. And they go parallel. That means the power of the Gandharvas and the power of the Asuras is the same. There are Asuras. So Asuras are like what they call devils in the English Western. They call devils. They're the bad spirits. Bad spirits that create, just the way Gandharvas help people to create positivity and positive creations, the devils help people to create chaos and
War.
confusion and war. Okay. So, how does one decide whether you've been guided by a devil or by a Gandharva? The mind is the barometer. If you're in a positive mind, an uplifted mind, and you're a sadhak, you're in mantra japa, and you're conscious and aware of your actions and thoughts and everything, you automatically connect to the higher level. If you're angry anytime, even a good person can be angry anytime. If you're angry anytime and you allow yourself to breathe, to kind of marinate in that anger, or you immediately will get four friends that join together and start talking ill about the person, about the issue, and you're supported by a lot of people that will take you further in another step of that anger, etc. So this support system that you get for causing negative chaos here on earth is given by the Asuras. They embody, just like Gandharvas embody. Gandharva connects to you when you want to do good work. Even if for a simple thing like you want to party or you want to create a celebration in home, you get ideas from the Gandharvas. Even for simple celebrations, for ceremonies, you have marriage ceremony, birthday ceremony, Satyanarayan Puja and all that. Gandharvas help you to create heaven on earth. Similarly, the Asuras help you to create hell on earth.
There's a social media platform called Reddit. Reddit contains forums related to topics that are popular in culture. And there's an infinite number of forums on Reddit. There's a lot that talk about culture positively, and there's a lot that talk about it negatively. So there'll be one for Bollywood, there'll be one for social media, there'll be one for the world of cricket. And often the commonality in some of these negative forums is they approach almost every single topic negatively.
Yeah, that's the fad. That's the work, that's the dharma.
So on some level, the realm of the Asuras is affecting all these people.
Of course, they're supported. It's important for me to give an example here, if you permit me.
Yes.
Yeah. I had a Filipino once to come to learn with me. I do one-on-one learnings in the Hermitage. I used to do more that before. Now I have group online sessions happening and I do personal coachings now. I take up coachings for good people who want to progress. So I had this Philippine boy who came to study with me, and he was into substance abuse and alcoholism, and he says, Ma, I don't even. And so he had a realization. He had a godly realization because of which he just gave up everything and he went on a personal journey of becoming a monk. So a very dramatical story he had, but something that stayed with me in my mind, what he narrated to me. He said that every time I would take something, if he's consuming something, he says that I would see many dark forces behind me and they would as if put me with so much of power. He said I used to feel powerful. I used to feel the power of the whole world is with me, and they would walk with me, he says. And he says the moment I would come out of this thing and I would feel so powerless. I felt as if I couldn't even stand and walk and things like that. And when I was narrating to him this, with the choice, with the mind, and with our awareness, we can connect to either the higher or the lower. It depends on us. So vis-a-vis that, he was giving me this example. So the Asuras are parallel, as powerful as the Gandharvas. And then you have just like the Yakshas, you have Bhutas. Bhutas are Gana. They are like, just like the archangels, they are more powerful and they have Gana with them. They have many Asuras with them. They have many people with them. And so they affect people who are in negative thought for a long time. Somebody who is in a negative thought pattern for a long time, some form of depression or they support negative thought, negative action on earth. In their family, in their relationship, they almost like become devilish. The people almost like become very devilish. So they are a source of power to all negative activities. And then the last of them, at par with the gods, is Pishach, what the Western world calls vampires. The Pishach Shakti is a very, very huge Shakti. It's a huge Shakti. It's at par with gods. That means it's like a portal of energy. Again, negative energy. The universe is equally divided between white and black. It has to be. The game has to go on. So the Pishach Shakti, it's kind of almost like parasitic on someone. If it makes a person victim and to death, it will not leave. It resides and it sucks out prana. The three realms, it is said that the three realms do not have an independent source of prana in the universe. They thrive and survive on the prana of living beings. So they are all the time searching for someone to pile on as source of energy.
Speaking about the positive, highest world, you said that that's the Devlok.
The
right?
Devas, yes.
It would contain elements of Hanumanji.
All of our Devas. All of our Devas.
So the Pishach realm is as powerful as the Dev realm. So these are negative gods.
Yes. Yes.
Where would you place Satan in this?
कहीं भी डाल दो.
In our culture, who is an example of a Pishach?
A lot of them are there. Asuras have been mentioned in Purana also. We've had so many Asuras that have been spoken of, Mahishasur and, you know. I view those names quite differently though. I find them all symbolic of some wrong trait in us. For instance, you have a Jambasur. Jambasur is like when you yawn, then they say the Jambasur enters into your mouth and it makes your body very lazy. So the Jambhai word is basically yawning. Many of these Asura names are Krodhasur, they have all names associated with negative vrittis in human beings. So, however, I do believe that these two forces are coexisting. They're coexisting, the negative and the positive, and one must, as a human being, always make a conscious choice to be in the higher realms, in the above realms. And how can one do it? Because you get angry, everybody gets angry or irritated or depressed or, frustrated. This is invitation for the Asura, kingdom and the lower kingdom. So the moment you catch yourself going in any variation of moods, immediately start doing japa. Whatever japa you're doing, even if you for the heck of it you say Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, even if you don't mean it, it will still connect you to the realm above and not allow you to fall down. In olden times, people would say if you see something happening on the road and something that one shouldn't see, maybe some accident or anything, Ram, 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 just say that and move away. People would advise, the elders would advise the children, just say Ram, 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 Ram and move away. So you don't want even a visual taking us down there. It's like that. So name of God and chanting, Nam Smaran inside, in itself is a powerful tool that will take you in connection with the higher realms.
This is why a lot of people talk about high frequency conversation versus low frequency conversation.
Absolutely, yes. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And low frequency need not always be cheap or dirty. It could be even something as simple as fear. Fear is a very innocent thing. Can grip anybody, but it's bad.
Gossip.
Yeah.
Gossip.
Yeah, gossip, fear, gossip, and unnecessary defaming someone, shamming someone's name, or just talking for talking's sake about someone is absolutely a low frequency talk.
Okay. Let's get to high frequency talk. We spoke about Chinnamasta. Then we spoke about Bhairavi.
Yes, Bhairavi. After Bhairavi is Bhuvaneshwari. So she's ruling the entire sky. And therefore, she is manifesting here on earth what Kali, Tara and Shodashi are manifesting in the Hiranyagarbha. That means they are planning, they are manifesting. She is actually grossifying it here, making it a reality here on the earth. So Bhuvaneshwari is often worshipped for glory, richness, glory, enhancement in business, weddings, and relationships, fertility, child fertility, all the good things about household life, society life. Bhuvaneshwari gives you all the abundance, what word we use, abundance, in all sense, richness. The word abundance means richness in all sense, 360 degree of richness in every sense.
Okay. Different from...
Kamalatmika. Yeah.
How?
She's different from Kamalatmika, more blessedness, and this is more like earthly.
Hmm.
It's very subtle. It's very earthly. More approachable. Lakshmi is more approachable. That's why she's more famous.
Wow. Who prays to... Oh, we're talking about Bhuvaneshwari.
Huh.
Who prays to Bhuvaneshwari in the
In
modern
North India, I haven't seen much of a faith with her. But in South India, there are many of them. You have a lot of Bhuvaneshwari temples in South. North India, she isn't even known. Not many people, the common folk, they don't even know the word Bhuvaneshwari.
Should we be stopping the conversation here?
Mm-hmm.
Or should we elaborate on Tara, Kalima and Tripura
Shodashi,
Sundari?
Tripura Sundari.
Shodashi.
Yeah, we can, so that we do justice to this talk. Very briefly speaking about the rulers of the Gunas, especially the Shodashi, she's become more famous. And Tara has gone more to the Orient, to the Buddhist culture.
Why is that?
It's just, I think, some historical, geographical reason for it. Buddhism had come into India and, and then they developed. It's not that there's no work done there. It's not like that. The Buddhist saints and seers have worked a lot on, done a lot of sadhana on Tara. And Tantra has, as a separate wing of practice, has developed over there with the Tara cult. In here in India, we have Ugra Tara and Saumya Tara worshipped. Ugra Tara and Saumya Tara. The Ugra Tara is a very fiery version of Kali. They say that Kali is transcended. So you're there in consciousness. But Tara is transcending. That means she's very helpful for you to go take you into the higher this thing. So Tara worship is really very, especially in the east and the northeast, there's a lot of Tara worship still going on. We have the Tara Peeth, above West Bengal, in West Bengal near Calcutta. Tara Peeth is very famous. It's very nice. Ugra Tara is worshipped there. Saumya Tara has gone more to Buddhist, I feel. The one sitting on the lotus, the white colored Tara. She depicts education in Saraswati. She's a Tantric Saraswati. Even Matangi is a Tantric Saraswati, the lower. Because of arts, all the arts. This one is more white. Tara is more white because she opens wisdom and opens the direction, the right steps that you want to take in life. The misunderstanding that people often get out of these Devis is, out of all the Devi sadhanas, is their mind, the conditioned mind, automatically goes towards practical applications in their work and in their material side, which is not what they're made for. They are there. They're there. And that's something that you'll automatically get. You need not ask. It's something that you'll automatically get. You need not ask. But the focus being there reduces the effect of the blessings. The focus should be to embrace the Devi. Obviously, if the Devi is there, the source of energy is there, you'll get everything. If you say, I want to befriend the sun, is the sun going to befriend you without his rays? It's said that the glory of the Devi comes to you automatically when you befriend the Devi. So the focus, as the takeaway from this podcast probably, with me sitting here, that the love for the goddess is an important aspect that shouldn't be missed out. And focus on siddhis, focus on blessings, and focus on the byproducts of this blessing should not be focused on. You'll get that automatically. Those who really want to worship and they want to experience the Devi, increase your love and seeking for the Devi for her sake, rather than for this sake and that sake, which will automatically come. And then Kali, the dark. She is, all of us know, Ramakrishna Paramhans is there. So many other Kali sadhaks are there. Ocean of love and compassion. She annihilates everything. She finishes the ego completely. So Kali Bhakti is done, real Kali Bhakti is done by sadhaks, those who really want to finish their ego. She completely, it takes you into a transcended state of samadhi. She's samadhi. You can say that Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi, the samyam that we spoke about, in the Devis, Dharana, Dhyan and Samadhi, these three people are capable of doing. The three Devis are capable of doing.
Fair to say that Kali Sadhana works the fastest in terms of the
Yes,
goal.
because she is the most, your choice doesn't happen. People are very scared to choose Kali Sadhana.
She chooses you though.
She chooses you. She'll choose you. And it is the fastest. Because it is the purest. It is the purest. She's got no conditioning. Other Devis have avarans. Avaran, as in layers of personality, like, the different chakra personalities as we spoke. But Kali is absolutely nude. She's unconditioned, completely unconditioned. She has no avaran,
Raw energy.
raw energy.
On what basis does she choose the sadhak?
On the basis of your past deeds and past sadhana. If you've been on a tumultuous path and a steady, relentless, non-dying path, she has mercy and she will pick you up.
Okay. We once hosted someone on the show who was a descendant of the line of Pandits who perform pujas at the Pashupatinath temple in Nepal.
Oh, how amazing.
Incredible conversation about Shiva and Rudraksh actually.
Uh-huh.
I've not even asked you about the mala that you're wearing.
Uh-huh. This is it's called a Siddha Mala. It has all the, facets of the Rudraksha.
You always wear this?
Most of the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
That person told me that usually with people who end up choosing the Bhairav path have a tendency towards being destructive.
Could have in the past. Could have been in the past. It's a very familiarity, we call it. Familiarity. And so that goddess attracts, But benevolence is there with all the goddesses. And she will benevolently transform even that past. Unconscious is completely washed off in Devi Bhakti.
Of all the people you come across in your own life, how do you know that someone is likelier to step into Kali Upasana? What do you see different about that person?
Pata chal jata hai. And it's kind of, it kind of says, energy speaks. When you work with energy, energy speaks. There's a voice in your head that tells you. So there aren't any physical symptoms, so to say, of Kali Bhakti, but subtly the person's energy would speak. For sure, those who get attracted, drawn to Kali Bhakti, or Kali picks them up, they are at the epitome of, kind of destructing all the conditioning of the world. They are like in a crying mode of bhakti. Most of these
have understood that, hey, this human life that we know is fully conditioned.
Is redundant, is futile, it's all drama, and it's all a waste of time.
Great point to end this episode.
Thank you so much, Ranveer. And I'm going to see you again and again and again. I'm going to see your audience again and again and again. Thank you so much. Lots of love, light, peace, happiness, joy, and abundance immeasurable to all of you.
Thank you, ma'am. Means a lot. One last request. Okay? And immediately after you're done with what I ask you for, we'll end the episode.
Okay.
But one signing off mantra, because I know my guests and I know the way the audience is perceiving you. So if you could just give them one gift which they can play to themselves.
Okay. Shri Varchasyam Ayushram Arogyam Vidhat Pamanam Mahiyate Dhanam Dhanyam Pashum Bahuputra Labham Shatasamvatsaram Dirgham Ayuhu Rinarog Adi Daridra Papa Kshuda Apamrityava Bhaya Shoka Manastapa Nashtantu Mama Sarvada Ya Evam Ved Om Mahadevye Cha Vidmahe Vishnu Patni Cha Dhimahi Tanno Lakshmihi Prachodayata. Om Shanti.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
That was the episode for today, ladies and gentlemen. This particular episode was recorded a while ago. We have recently recorded one after the events that took place over the last 3 to 4 months. Watch out for that episode as well. Tell us what you feel about all these spiritual episodes that we've been releasing lately. Help us build the podcast even better, because these kind of conversations don't feel like work for me. These are my own genuine questions coming out of a place of genuine spiritual inquiry. I would love to know how I can improve the experience for you all. Thank you for listening in. Magya and Savira, TRS, and the whole team will be back very soon.